The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. The Mets in the Zone. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the Mets Mavens are both here. Robert Cole, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Ralph.
Good. We'll talk about your vacation in a moment. Let me introduce Marty Mert Rose, Jackson Heights' finest.
Hi, Ralph.
How
Very
you doing, Mert?
Very good.
Not bad, right? How many Jackson Heights people are there on Mets podcast? So congratulations, Mark.
Thank you.
You didn't do much in a lifetime. You just went to work every day for 43 years in a row.
That's about it.
Right?
Do what you got to do.
Do what you got to do. You're on vacation for the rest of your life. You deserve it more than anything. And Robert Cole was on vacation from vacation this week. Where'd you go, Robert?
We went across state. We live in the Tampa area, and we went basically directly across the state to the Vero Beach area. Some people may recognize Vero Beach as being the former training site of the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers for many years.
How has that changed? You mentioned something about the O'Malley family.
Yes, the O'Malleys, whose father Walter was one of the starters, and I cringe every time I say that name, but anyway, Walter O'Malley and Grant Trickey basically started Dodger Town back in the late 40s, 47, 48, and it was a retired naval barracks, and they turned it into a production site for baseball players. The players stayed in the old barracks. It was very desolate. The players said about the only thing there was to do is go to the beach and fish. There was virtually nothing there. Totally different now. Fancy shops, fancy restaurants, very well developed. But anyway, the O'Malley family, after selling the Dodgers, after a while, bought the old Dodger Town site and turned it into what they now call historic Dodger Town. And they basically rented out to tournaments and things of that nature. I don't think there's any ghosts of Pee Wee Reese, Jackie Robinson, Gil Hodges running around anymore, but at least it's still being used in some fashion for baseball.
And do they pay homage to these guys that you mentioned?
I really did not see anything other than the street names. In the complex itself, some of the streets are named after Pee Wee Reese and Duke Snyder and players like that, and that hasn't changed. But, I haven't seen anything else. Now, a number of years ago, the very last year that the Dodgers minor league team played in Vero Beach, we were across there. My son and I went to a game, and there was very, very little signs of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Los Angeles Dodgers, yes, but not much about the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Good. Hey, this is off the subject a little bit, but on the subject. Robert, you're a longtime Brooklyn Dodger fan. You were a kid when they left, like Mert and I were. We're about the same age. And naturally, O'Malley has taken an incredible hit in the memory of sports fans, Brooklyn people. Is there any way that, looking back, you can cut him slack? Is there anything that he did that you might say, besides the Campy salute in, I think it was 59, when he brought Roy Campanella back and they lit candles and they had a terrific fundraiser that took care of Roy for the rest of his life, and O'Malley was very generous with that. But in the whole move and the whole transgression with Robert Moses and Wagner and the mayor of New York, Robert Wagner, is there any way in history that we can look back and cut this guy a break, in your opinion?
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy for that. There's two Walter O'Malleys. Okay, there's the Walter O'Malley that we remember in Brooklyn, and there's the Walter O'Malley who's feted as a god in Los Angeles. Okay, so which was which? I mean, he claimed, and they put him in the Hall of Fame, saying that he brought baseball to Los Angeles and to the West Coast. In reality, the West Coast had one of the best baseball leagues ever in the Pacific Coast League, and the Pacific Coast League was working very hard to become a third major league. And when O'Malley saw that that could possibly happen, he quick bought the Los Angeles franchise of the Pacific Coast League, okay, and got his butt out there before, the Pacific Coast League could become a major league. So, that we could spend several shows just talking about that. And, you guys, were Giants fans, you especially, Ralph. And basically O'Malley grabbed hold of Horace Stoneham and drug him with him. So, it's no, I can't say anything good about him.
Okay. I'm just curious if he did something to warn the city years before that, where he was, at least at one time, if he was honest and clear and said, this is the way it is. I'm having trouble with the ballpark. It's where it is, missing out. I don't know. I'm just looking for something to forgive, some reason to forgive the guy. A little
You're
bit.
asking the wrong guy if you want forgiveness.
I got one question about that situation. If the city would have given him the site that he wanted, where the Barclays Center is now, the hub of the Long Island Railroad, would he have stayed or not? So that's the big question, because a lot of the big deal was his fans were moving to Long Island, and he wanted that site in Brooklyn where the Barclays Center is now and the Long Island Railroad is. So his fans could just, after the game, go right on the railroad, and be home in less than an hour. Would he have stayed if he was given that property?
Good question.
Do we know?
All right. Okay. No, okay. He was betting that he would not be given that property. Okay. He knew that legally he couldn't be given the property. Okay. He asked for something that he knew in his heart and soul that he couldn't get. All right. And he was able to rally himself around that. Now, just go back, yes, you were right. He was saying, a lot of his fans are moving to Long Island, and he wanted to, make it easier for his fans. Well, how much easier would it have been if he had accepted the offer of putting his ballpark where Shea Stadium was, okay, which was even closer to Long Island, and which was, had a Long Island Railroad station right outside. And that's subway stations.
That's a question that brings up another question. Was he offered that and refused it because he didn't want to call himself, the team, anything but the Brooklyn Dodgers? Was he...
That's what he said. We don't know if he meant it or not.
Okay. Now, initially, when he first moved to Los Angeles, Okay, he actually wanted to call the Dodgers the Brooklyn Dodgers of Los Angeles.
And
that's the God's honest truth. And okay, he was talked out of that, and the people in Los Angeles said, "No, we're not going to. That's not acceptable." But he felt, the Brooklyn Dodger brand was very important. Okay, and he could have still been the Brooklyn Dodgers if he was, where Shea Stadium was. I mean, how much closer can you get to Brooklyn than Queens?
Right. But he was offered that Shea Stadium site.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
He was offered that site. And then, bringing it full cycle with the Mets, when the Mets were trying to decide where to put a ballpark, he was 100% behind the Shea Stadium site. Said that was the best site in all of New York City, to put the new ballpark for the Mets. And then as an afterthought, he said, it is the best site, but not for me.
Oh, wow. That had a sting as a Dodger fan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and, now you guys as Giants fans, I mean, you were going to lose that team. Okay, Horace Stoneham wanted to go to Minneapolis, because they had their AAA farm team there. Willie Mays came through there. Willie McCovey came through there. Orlando Cepeda came through there. The people in Minneapolis, they were Giants fans, and that would have been the appropriate and proper place to put the New York Giants. But O'Malley was not going to have any of that. He knew that the rivalry between the Dodgers and Giants, you could put it in Russia, and there would still be a rivalry. So he was going to make sure that Horace Stoneham would go with him to California.
From the best of my memory, and I even had a Minneapolis T-shirt that I wore to the Y, the Flushing Y, when I was 10, and Marty and I can remember wearing that day. We went on the bus, Minneapolis Giants. They were gone in practicality from New York before O'Malley dragged them. Horace was more wronged by New York than was O'Malley. O'Malley was making more money than anyone in the National League. So he wasn't coming from poverty or coming from a place where he was doing anything else but getting richer by going to L.A. He was a smart guy. He had this calculated. Am I correct, Robert?
Oh yes, he was a businessman. Okay, now if they had elected him to the Businessman's Hall of Fame, I would have been all for that. Okay, because he was as shrewd a businessman as there was. Okay, he was as knowledgeable about a dollar as there was in baseball and, really in the business world. Okay, he made his somewhat fortune. Okay, he was a lawyer. Okay, to hear his friends say that not a very successful lawyer. He was a bankruptcy lawyer. Okay, he handled bankruptcies. That's where he made his niche. And all of his wealth basically was gotten through the bankruptcy courts. He was generally, because of his political affiliations, in bankruptcies in New York, they would appoint what they called a referee. And the referee actually took care of the selling of property when, the judgment went against the people who owned certain things. And he bought up a lot of that. He bought up a lot of that, a lot of the stock, a lot of the different pieces of businesses. So the money he had, he got through that. So that's how he, made his so-called fortune.
He was shrewd, and if you think of it, these people are going bankrupt. He probably paid pennies on the dollar for all this stuff. Not
Absolutely.
Only did he buy them up, but he bought them up cheaply. And and originally he was a lawyer for the Dodgers before he assumed ownership. How did his ownership come about?
His ownership came about because he was, as you said, he was put on the board of directors sort of as an overseer. The Brooklyn Trust Company held a mortgage on Ebbets Field and held a lot of the loans. Real briefly, Larry McPhail became the general manager of the Dodgers for a period of time before Branch Rickey, and he only took the job on the premise that the Brooklyn Trust Company would loan him money to refurbish Ebbets Field, which he did, and to buy some ball players, which he did. And so there were loans outstanding to the Brooklyn Trust Company. And O'Malley was basically put in as an overseer to make sure that the Brooklyn Trust Company was, represented. Branch Rickey was brought in the early 40s, just before the war, to run the Dodgers as the general manager. And the Brooklyn Trust Company saw that as a good way of getting Rickey involved in ownership. And they sort of put an ownership group together with Rickey and a couple of other people. And O'Malley said, hey, wait, I want my piece of this. I want to get in on this. And there was one gentleman involved in the ownership group by the name of John Smith. John Smith was the president and CEO of Pfizer Chemical, which is big in the news today, but it was one of the biggest drug companies of all time back then. And he was really the money man. He put cash into it, and Rickey got in on a loan, and O'Malley got in on a loan. So O'Malley was basically an unknown person in the baseball world.
Right. Whereas Rickey ran the St. Louis, both St. Louis teams for a period of time and developed the farm system. He was
Correct.
An innovator.
Correct.
Did he own as big a piece of the Dodgers as O'Malley? Excuse me.
Okay. The way it worked out was eventually 75% of the Dodgers became available for sale. 25% was still held by one of the granddaughters of one of the owners of the Dodgers. And Rickey, O'Malley, John Smith bought 75%. They each owned 25%.
Ah, okay. Now, how did O'Malley remove Rickey? How did he power him out of owning his share at the Dodgers?
Well, Rickey basically lived on his paycheck. Rickey had a deal with the Dodgers that he was hired as general manager and president of the Dodgers, and he got, I think, $50,000 a year, which was big money back then. And he also got a percentage of players that he sold. And O'Malley was just livid about that. He didn't like that arrangement at all. And what happened was John Smith passed away during the 1950 baseball season. And John Smith liked Rickey, and he liked O'Malley, but he thought Rickey was a great baseball man, but O'Malley was a great money man. And so in his will, he gave O'Malley the voting right of his wife's shares. So basically now O'Malley had 50% voting rights. And Rickey saw the writing on the wall and started looking for somebody to buy his 25%. O'Malley then offered Rickey $250,000 for his share, which was basically what Rickey bought in on. And, of course, the Dodgers were worth a lot more than that. Rickey, on his own, found a buyer, who was willing to pay $1 million for Rickey's shares.
Oh,
and
wow.
part of the ownership agreement between the three of them was that if one of them wanted to sell, the other two partners had the right of meeting and matching any offer that the selling party would get.
Right.
And O'Malley, to his dying day, swore that it was a setup and that Ricky found this guy who never intended to actually buy the Dodgers. And he was a very influential real estate man at the time. And, so O'Malley basically had to, fork up that money. Okay. And one of the funny parts about this is $50,000. There was a $50,000 fee that if the original partners decided to buy out, the party that was trying to buy in would be given $50,000 as a token, for his effort and tying up his money. Okay. Well, what happened was that person when the check came in, to clear, on the back of the check was the signing of the guy, okay, and Branch Rickey. The guy gave Ricky the $50,000. Okay, which ate at O'Malley and reinforced in O'Malley's mind that it was a setup, and the two men hated each other from that point on.
Okay.
And of course, that then led to the Mets. Okay, because Ricky was asked by William Shea and Mayor Wagner, okay, to start a new league, okay, which
the Continental League, the Continental League.
Correct, and the New York team would be sort of the bellwether and centerpiece of that, and then that basically forced the National League into accepting, the Mets and the Houston Astros.
Right. We're off the Mets subject a little bit, so I'm glad you identified the direct connect to all of this with the Mets. But I wanted to digress a little bit because last week was some sort of Roberto Clemente anniversary. I don't know what it was, but rightfully so, Major League Baseball honors superstars, like whatever they did, the year he retired, the year he had 3,000 hits. But it reminds me of how Ricky got back at the Dodgers in a very complicated way. How did Ricky and the Pittsburgh Pirates end up with Roberto Clemente?
Well, this is an interesting story as well, okay? Back in the 1940s, Ricky was still the general manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. And as I said, Larry McPhail was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Cardinals were being scrutinized by the commissioner's office of having so many ball players under contract, okay, and keeping them and, not allowing them to, go to other teams. And they started cracking down. The Cardinals had Pete Reiser, okay, and most baseball fans know who Pete Reiser was. And they traded him to the Dodgers, and Ricky made McPhail promise that they would not use Reiser, that they bury him in the minor leagues. Leo DeRocha saw Reiser playing, okay, what a tremendous ball player he was, and he and McPhail went at it, and McPhail finally allowed DeRocha to bring him up to the Dodgers. Okay, so now you fast forward into the 50s, and the Dodgers were trying to hide Roberto Clemente in the minor leagues, and basically they told their minor league managers not to play him because they wanted to try to get him through the Rule 5 draft, okay, without protecting him. Ricky, of course, knew all about Clemente, and as soon as they had the opportunity, they took him in this Rule 5 draft. The Rule 5 draft, as it is today, and it was then, if you draft somebody in the Rule 5 draft, he has to stay on your ball team, that entire year. So Clemente was drafted in the winter before the 55 season. was kept with the Pirates for the entire 55 season. And basically, as they say, the rest is history.
Whoa. Did O'Malley feel particularly ripped off about losing Clemente?
Like I said, the two men hated each other. Buzzy Bavasi was basically the player guy on the Dodgers. O'Malley was basically, behind the scenes, money and stuff like that. So I don't know. I guess probably it did eat at his car a little bit, but he never said anything about it.
Okay. Let's really lead into the Mets by saying that the Continental League, which Ricky never came to be, but that was the threat that you alluded to get expansion. Were those the two teams that were the first choices? I know the Mets must have been because of the New York thing, but how did it come to be that Houston got a franchise?
Well, Texas also was a big, a big growing area, and they wanted to get into Texas as well as New York. New York and Houston would have been part of the Continental League, and also as a tie-in with the Giants. Okay, don't forget. I'm sure you two know this. Okay, Joan Payson, who became the principal owner of the Mets, was also a minor stockholder in the New York Giants. And in fact, when Horace Stoneham held the vote of all the stockholders, the only one to vote no on the move to San Francisco was Joan Payson.
Right. I remember that endeared her to Mets fans right away because they stressed that, and they stressed her loyalty to New York. And she was
ironically, the man representing Joan Payson was the infamous M. Donald Grant.
M. Donald Grunt, they used to call him, responsible for the Saturday Night Massacre. But that's years later. Thank you. That was very concise, Robert. It's nice to be a maven in two franchises. I'm just a maven in washing Tally's dishes. And that's a big job, all right? It's not a big job when you wash the dishes. It's a big job when you don't wash the dishes. So I've learned that, and so I'm getting better. I'm learning. Marty, lead us into the Mets. What's going on? We just came off an incredible week, as far as I'm concerned. That the Mets are where they are now, with all of their injuries, many injuries, guys still haven't come back. Conforto, Nemo.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, is it as much a surprise to you and Robert as it has been to me that they're doing as well as they are, as injured as they have been?
Absolutely. To me, it's shocking that they're in first place by 3.5 games at this point. They're missing 4 regular guys. It's just incredible. And 2 of their best pitchers too, Thor, right. Carrasco. Right. And until recently they had Lugo gone, which hurt their bullpen. Whoever they seem to plug in is doing the job.
Yes.
Really, I'm not even that interested in getting the third baseman back, you know?
J.D. Davis.
Davis, I mean, the guys filling in for Davis are doing great. Whether it's Villar or Peraza, whoever they put there, they're fielding better than Davis could, I think, and they're hitting very well. Some of these other guys I never even heard of. McKinney, this guy looks pretty good out there. I don't recall ever seeing him before. Drury's doing well also. I don't know who these guys are, and it's just amazing that, I hate to use that word, but it comes up. You know, it's amazing that they are
amazing. There's no G on the end of that. Amazing.
Sorry, exactly. You know, to be where they are it really is shocking, really. But they got a tough month coming up. The rest of this month, I mean, they got the Padres again, and they got the Cubs who swept them in Chicago, and then it's back to the division and a crap load of doubleheaders. I mean, a bunch of
like 8 games fewer than some of these other teams.
God. Yeah, they got a doubleheader in Washington. They got a doubleheader in Philadelphia. They got a makeup game in Washington before they go to Atlanta. So yeah, it doesn't get any easier. This, you know, to see where they're going to be by the end of June is going to be very interesting. And like you said, I don't think Conforto or McNeil are going to be back before July.
No, McNeil too. Not only, and Nemo's out, and he seems to every now and again they're talking about sending him to rehab, and he has a setback, and as does the third baseman.
He's got a finger injury, and they say he's just starting to swing against the machine. But Davis is still in a splint, and he's not even swinging.
Right.
Whoa.
So, you know.
And that kind of brings up something they ask you guys, especially you, Marty, okay? The medical staff. Okay? Yeah. Now, they screwed up with McNeil. Yeah. All right? They allowed McNeil to rest a day and then play a day and then rest a day, and he went from having a cramp to tearing the hamstring, and now they're doing the same thing with Villar.
Well, they kept him, you know, they did keep him on the bench the other day, and Rojas even said that we don't want to have another McNeil situation. He did say that. So, you know, whether he's going to be back in the lineup tomorrow remains to be seen. He could, but, you know, the way these other guys are playing, I wouldn't rush him either.
No, and you know, and think about it. If they had put him on the IL initially, he'd be basically ready to come off it now. I mean, it was about 10 days ago when he first, you know, suffered the injury.
Right.
And they insist on, you know, that thing where, well, he's available if we need him kind of thing. And then they wind up putting him in a game. And, you know, so I don't know. 3 years ago,
we talk a lot about training staff and doctors and what have you. We never mention, though, that the players aren't always communicative with the team and honest with the team, and their agents sometimes make decisions for them that ends up hurting the team. Can't always blame it on the team, but any team that you pull 2 hamstring muscles in one inning with your major, basically, at least in the same game, whatever it was, you'd say, "Oh, you're stretching properly?" You know,
or doing your running or hydrating, all that stuff. Yeah.
And you got to blame. You know, look at the bottom line. But it's been years like this with the Mets and injuries and doctors not being honest and and stuff like that.
Doesn't matter who the doctor is; it stays the same.
Right. And how do you scout who's going to be a good doctor? You know, it's got to be difficult for the team and all teams. And look at the injuries all over baseball. It's not just the Mets.
No, it's not.
It's an incredible amount of injuries, and my mind is running here because time is of the essence. I wanted to say how proud of the Mets I was in these past 4 games with San Diego. They split with a team that is arguably as good as any team in baseball, and they held their own. They played good ball while splitting. It wasn't just an enigma.
Well, they won with their 2 best pitchers, and they lost when they didn't have their 2 best pitchers.
You know? And they actually should have won that first game. Okay, which caused Marty to I think go to sleep when the ball bounced off of the glove over the fence.
Oh yes, yeah, that was. There comes a time in a baseball game when you have to go. Enough's enough.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Am I being entertained by this, or am I being driven nuts by this? I wanted to note, though, that Mets split really meant a lot, and I think if they go on to have a good year, you could look back and say they really proved something to themselves with that split. And I also want to get just our 3 voices when you mentioned when I mentioned DeGrom and the streak he's going through. It's not just this year; it's like 4 years. This guy has been incredibly dominant. I saw a meme on Facebook today comparing his efforts with Gibson in his prime. This guy has numbers that are not only Gibson-like, they exceed Gibson. A .062 ERA. Yeah. Incredible. We are watching greatness, and that we're privileged that way. Because, 55 years as a Met fan, we've seen a lot of crap. We've also seen this week Curtis Maben outdid the late Don Zimmer.
He outdid the record holder, which was Charlie Smith. Charlie Smith held the record for the longest hitless streak at the beginning of his Mets career. Okay, I think Don Zimmer only went like 23 or 24 at bats. Charlie Smith won 26.
There's a name, Charlie Smith. I think he was traded for Roger Maris. Am I correct? With the Cardinals.
Yes, he was part of that trade. Yes.
In another, and who did the third? I know this. The third baseman that the Mets got from Cincinnati. Do you guys remember who it was? For Don's Cliff Cook, right?
Cliff Cook.
Great. Cliff Cook came to the Mets, a pretty good prospect, but had a bad back and could not bend down. And I remember when they found that out 2 or 3 days after getting him, even in '62, it was clear. The future as a Mets fan was clear. If only we would have known in '62. Saw us in trouble and worrying about this. We had that to look forward to. But I'll tell you, DeGrom kind of makes a lot of the bad stuff when you think of guys like Seaver and Harrelson. we've had greats. We've had our share of terrific baseball too. And so,
hey, Marty and Ralph, who was the pitcher that came up with DeGrom on the Mets, who was actually supposed to be the better pitcher?
Harvey or Mats?
No.
I don't recall.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that the other day. They brought up two guys at the same time, okay, and DeGrom, of course, pitched against the Yankees that night against, I believe it was Tyler Clippard. And there was another guy they brought up at the same time, and he was supposed to be what DeGrom has become, and I can't remember.
Well, that was after the Pulsifer years, and where they went through 4 or 5 other pitchers that were supposed to be this and supposed to be that. DeGrom, DeGrom's 33. I read that today. I had no idea. He's a late bloomer.
Yeah, well, don't forget he played in college. He was a shortstop, and he also had Tommy John surgery. So yeah, he had delays coming up. Right.
Hey, I got to say something good about Mats. Mats has rejuvenated his career, albeit not with the Mets, with Toronto. I root for that guy. Long Island kid, came up with Mats with the Mets. I rooted for him in that group more than anyone. And right now I'm rooting for Thor to come back and make it through Tommy John surgery, which is no small trick. There's an incredible amount of rehab with these guys. They say, well, you come back, you're faster than you were. You got 6 hours a day of rehab for a year, that kind of shit, and not knowing for sure if you're gonna be back. It's not easy to have your body cut open and ligaments move from here to there, and yeah. Anyway, I wanted to give DeGrom just a holy shit moment, like, wow. And we got to. Hey, listen, good show, guys.
Yep. Enjoyed it.
I do most every week other than the weeks like a couple of weeks ago where they were going so bad, I just had nothing to ask you guys. It was, I remember every moment of that show, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to ask? How is this going to be interesting? I thought they were dead in the water. And I will, I forget, let's add your thoughts about Lindor and how he seems to be slowly but surely coming out of this. That's nice.
He's getting used to the National League, and I don't mean to sound racist on this, but a lot of these Latin guys, they don't like the cold weather. When it warms up, they warm up a lot of times. You see them in March and April. They got like scarves and hats down over their ears, and like they can't take it. But I just had a feeling. You know how good a player he is, so he's going to come around eventually. And as I said, I had said that when it warms up, he'll warm
you
up.
Did,
and he
has.
He
definitely did. I mean, he was hitting like a madman in Florida. I mean, that's basically what got him the extension. Was he was just hitting everything in sight, and then all of a sudden they go up north, and then you had all the delays and the postponements and stuff and junk like that. And he wasn't the only one. I mean, basically nobody on the Mets was hitting in the beginning.
No.
Yeah. I had a thought this week. I wish Alonso would not have participated in the home run derby in his rookie year.
He wants to be in it again. Did you know he does?
Yeah.
He does. I don't know.
It's the thing. Home runs are strikeouts, and that's baseball today. But
unfortunate.
Maybe someday we'll hear the words again. Get him on. Get him over. Get him in. Maybe.
Well, if you go on YouTube and you listen to some of the games from the 50s and 60s, you can hear that.
Right, and I do. I listen to a lot of Yankee games in the 55, 58, 61. Mel Allen, Red Barber, and Phil Rizzuto in one booth. Yeah. Unbelievably great. And not taking anything away from guys like Howie Rose, who I think is right up there with the real good ones. But those guys, and they had a lot to work with. But Rizzuto said something on one of the tape games that I was listening to. There was foul ball back into the booth, and Mel Allen booted it. And Phil Rizzuto says, I guess I get to call Mel Allen booting a ground ball. He's called enough of mine over the years. I don't know if you remember that. And Mert, they have on YouTube a doubleheader with Detroit. We used to go to Rockaway, as you well know, and bring the radio and listen to the Yankee doubleheaders. And this is in '61.
Wasn't that July 4th doubleheader? Was it?
I don't know for sure what the dates were. But
I went to one of those. And,
with Detroit?
Yeah. With Detroit. It might have been on the 4th of July. We were in junior high school. I was supposed to meet a guy in the 74th Street subway station. I said, look, if you're not there by a certain time, we're never going to get a seat. You know, and it's like, that's when they had all the seats. You know, it was like 70,000. And, the guy didn't show up on time. So I went by myself. And you know what? There was no seats. I sat on the steps upstairs. It was unbelievable.
Whoa.
There was no seats.
That doubleheader, there were 72,000 people in Yankee Stadium.
I believe it.
Well, I remember listening to Detroit Yankee doubleheaders on our radio at the beach in Rockaway.
Yeah, sure.
The Charlie Maxwell years when K-Line. Detroit was terrific. They they made for a great rivalry, and that's pre-Met days. Hey guys, 2 weeks or a week from now, we'll be doing it again.
Okay. Well, hopefully we have good things to talk about again.
Yeah, next Monday they play the Cubs at home, 7:10.
I wonder if there'll be a blockbuster trade with the third baseman with the Cubs.
I don't think so. Are they in first place? I think they are.
Well, they just got swept. They just got swept by the Giants in San Francisco.
Oh, okay. But they had been doing really well. They were flying high.
Yeah, they were flying high, and all of a sudden they went out to San Francisco, and the surprising San Francisco Giants swept them. But
are they surprising? Look at the guys that are doing well for them: Crawford, Longerio, and what have you. These guys have just Posey is pulling a year out where he's come back to Posey standards, and he didn't even play at all last year. So this is kind of a miracle. Crawford's tremendous. And the Mets, last thing on my list, Guillermo never could pronounce his name. The utility
Guillaume.
infield. Guillermo, he just came off the DL, and he's a very valuable piece. He'll make it easier for Rojas.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
So good things we talked about and good things we wish for. Marty Rose, Robert Cole, the New York Met Mavens. Be well, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being hosts on the show, guys. It makes for a fun time, fun Monday for me. And just want to say happy trails and adios.
Very good.
See you soon.
Night.
Good night.
Night.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.